Welcome back to Muzo TV. Today we're going to be talking about the future of our schools in the COVID era with our special guest, Jill from Fielding International. Hi, Jill. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Erica. Thank you for having us.
We've worked with Jill and her team at Fielding International on some amazing school projects, most recently Cranston's Eden Park School in Rhode Island, which we've been getting some amazing feedback from. So for our viewers, Jill, could you tell a little bit about yourself and how you've gotten connected and passionate for education and learning?
Sure. I am from Texas. I have been an educator for over 25 years. I did not have your typical learning experience. The first time I was suspended from school was kindergarten. And it just sort of, I was not a great student. I was the one who asked why all the time and was curious, didn't want to sit in my seat ever or follow directions, things like that. And so school is not an easy journey. So when I graduated high school, going to college, really becoming a teacher and trying to figure out how to change what school would be like for kids was really important to me. I didn't think that the treatment was always fair and equitable, and that students really needed voice. So I went to college to be a teacher, went into teaching right out of university. I got a job in the newspaper at an Outward Bound school in Colorado. And it was a wall-to-wall project-based learning school where every Wednesday we had to be in the community. So I taught math and middle school. So we did things like design orienteering courses on the ski mountain. We partnered with the Bureau of Land Management to create elk migration route signs on the interstates. Learning about slope and coordinate plane and things like that. So for me, I started in experiential learning because it's really important to me that students have a hands-on experience that's authentic, is relevant, because that's what lifts the complexity out of the types of content that we're trying to teach kids. So I've been an educator in math, and then I moved into technology and became our school's technology director, certified in fixing computers and network engineering, became a Microsoft systems engineer, and then went on to start my own school from there. So I've been a school director, school leader, all connected to that experiential learning, designing schools for kids that really fostered their curiosity and their wonder. I didn't want them to end up like me, whereas like in the 7th grade, I used to unscrew the air conditioning vents in middle school and climb through the HVAC systems to hear the interesting teachers. We talked a little bit about this the other day. So I failed algebra, but I passed calculus in the air conditioning vent. But that didn't really go over well with my teachers. So that's really been my passion. I have 2 daughters and opened up a Spanish immersion school, PBL school for them when it was time for my youngest daughter to start elementary school. And that school is still up and running today, and have been training teachers in project-based learning around the world for many years, since 2010. And recently, about 3 years ago, connected with Fielding International to really look at the confluence of physical spaces, our physical learning environment, connected to that pedagogical practice, and how we really shift the learning environment to foster really that curiosity and engaging kids at a higher level. So it's sort of my background. That's where I've been for the last 25 years and love it. This is my passion. I get to work with teachers every day and be a student alongside them and watch them grow. And so, yeah, we foster and rescue German Shepherds, and my 9-year-old likes to name them after food. We currently have a major cheeseburger. We've had a Frank Sinatra and that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. It sounds like you're really passionate about your work, and we're excited to get into this and hear more from you. The Muzo team and I relate to your passion for experiential learning. We strive to offer solutions for all students, and we recognize that each student has a different effective learning method. That being said, we also recognize that our physical schools are going to dramatically be altered as we go back to school in the fall. So with that, what do you think the positive impacts are of the COVID crisis in our learning environment?
You know, we spend a lot of time at Fielding International with the architects and the designers and the interior designers and the educators, really looking at what's going to happen in schools and what's already happening in schools. We met with two heads of school, one from Switzerland, one from Germany, three, and one from Russia yesterday, to really talk about what the positive impacts on their environment are going to be and look like, knowing that the CDC guidelines are really, the way that they're being interpreted really drops us back 50 years in the kind of evolutionary work that we've done in our spaces with flexible furniture and utilizing spaces. And so, you know, while we're thinking about maintaining healthy environments, some of the positives that we can pull from that, from our first distance sort of crisis learning into where we're going next in the fall, is we have more active sharing. I've never in all my experience watched teachers connect with each other and really foster their own professional learning experience in an online format. Also thinking about how can I take all of these amazing experiences in this blended environment and translate that into a hybrid model for next year, and really fostering that student directed experience. You know, I think that when we look at more active sharing and kids being out of a school space, they have to become motivated intrinsically in a different way. They have to start to self-direct. And many students we lost because they didn't have that skill set. And so I think one of the positives we're really going to see is that students have agency, and they know they have agency because they've already experienced it. So that positive is what we're always trying to do in building agency, is really been sort of moored in the experience of this crisis so far. And so that's one. And then really looking at the community and the school community as an anchor. Parents are getting together and communicating more. They have a deeper understanding of what is happening, and in some cases, what's not happening in schools. And that really has, I think, in a really positive way, exposed and pulled back that iron curtain of what school is today to surface these inequities that we're seeing in schools all over the country, even in the same city, the variances and the equity issues that we're seeing. And so, and I think the third thing, so I've mentioned two, and I think the third thing is that we'll shift from this industrial content focused model to really a relationship workflow model. And that's really important as we think about the physical environments that kids are going back into. In the CDC guidelines saying 6 feet, now the WHO's coming back and saying 3 feet. You know, how do we create these spaces and resiliency in these spaces as the COVID response is changing almost weekly? I think that flexibility is proving to the education system, who is so slow in changing, that we can change and pivot really quickly.
Absolutely. So although we are experiencing some uncertain times, we are seeing some positive impacts of the COVID crisis. Our teachers and parents are now recognizing that we need to make a shift in the way we effectively teach and engage our students. We're also recognizing that we need to give our students a voice in deciding how they want to learn. And with that, we can help foster that natural curiosity and self-directed behavior that you've been talking about. For our students, what does this shift mean for their physical learning environments?
Well, you know, like we said, you know, we've been so content focused. We've got 30 kids in a class. We've got, you know, content 50 minutes by 50 minutes. And this sort of shift in density means that we're looking at more school choice than we've ever had, ever in our society. You know, we look at Detroit's plans for reopening and reentry, Arizona, Texas is in flux. They have no idea what they're doing yet. Maybe we shouldn't put that in the TV show, but they really don't. But the sense of, with all of this choice, you know, as a kid, I can choose distance learning, I could choose a hybrid model, and I can choose an in-school model. And that means the reduced school density inside the building fosters better relationships, one-to-one. We can start to elevate what personalized learning is, where kids can choose projects they want to work on, and they can work on those projects with community. They can reach out to community, because that density means kids have more access to space in the room. So I can call experts and sit and have conversations with experts like this, because I don't have 30 kids competing for that acoustical echo or sort of chamber that they live in. And so I think that that's one thing. As we look at the reduced school density piece, is the relationship model, the teacher moving from, you know, that real directed instruction, because you're trying to manage 30 human beings. And through that constructed time, it takes a full 8-hour day. So that reduced density means I have more time to work with students. I can have students join me via video if it's a blended learning option. I can have students set up to be on their own on a personalized plan, and monitoring and giving kids more of a personalized experience, so they're not conforming to sort of the broadcast schedule of today's education model. And I think that that kind of choice is, again, another bonus for what we're experiencing right now. Do I think there are drawbacks in that reduced density? Absolutely, because our school budgets don't necessarily align to that. Need for online teachers, in-class teachers, which means they don't get as much time to help facilitate design and co-creation of projects with students, which really fostered their natural curiosity.
So we've seen some major changes in the physical environments of our school due to the pandemic. But what does this mean for the roles of our students, teachers, and parents?
Well, I think we're going back to that experiential model, where we have to design authentic, relevant experiences, or we lose kids. So that changes the role of students, that gives them the opportunity to have more of a voice in what they're doing, and allows them agency over the content and creating those interdisciplinary connections at home, which then changes the role of their parents. And I think that the parent role is a very complicated role, depending on, you know, I work in one environment with a group of parents where one parent stays home all the time. So this has been a really easy transition for them, because that parent doesn't work. They can set up a safe environment for their student. But then I work with students who both parents work, or they come from a single family home, or they live with grandparents or guardians, and there are 5 kids in the house. They're sharing one computer. And so how teachers and students shift their roles really has the opportunity to propel learning and change the role of learners being this sort of passive experience into a really active experience. And for parents and guardians, how we set up agreements in learning spaces, just like teachers set up agreements in their environment. There's a class culture, but now there's a learning culture in your home space, or in your space that you're learning in. You know, I work with some teachers, their students are calling in from the parking lot of a library or a 7-Eleven, because that's the only time they have internet access. And so how do we create a learning culture in any space and in any environment? So I think that that shifts the role of teachers and students, and parents and guardians, because we're all developing a culture together based on these models, where traditionally in the industrial model, it's you send your kid off to school and they have total control of what happens. in the sense of bell schedules in a public school, bell schedules when your kids eat, how often they can go to the bathroom, when they can drink water. You know, our private schools and our international schools are a little bit different. And so I think as we look at the way the roles are going to shift, it will also shift and impact the design of a school. How we can actually get beyond the doors of our classroom. You know, our work at Fielding International, we talk about two different models. We foster a learning community model where there are a suite of spaces. So if I'm working with a small group of students, I have flexible furniture that moves, tables that flip up like the ones that are by you that kids can ride on, they can lay on the floor, they can shift and be in control of their space. And then we have this cells and bells model where kids walk in, they have a corridor, they close the doors, and that adult is in charge of everything. And so these roles are shifting because of COVID-19. You know, I was reading in the Wall Street Journal this morning, you know, kids are eating lunch in the hallway. They're not allowed to use utensils. They're shifting libraries and cafeterias. So the positive in that is we're seeing that all of our spaces within a school can be utilized in a much more efficient and effective way because the percent at which spaces go unused is really high when we think about cafeterias, when we think about libraries. And so by having to expand space because of these density issues, we can take furniture and create learning environments in places we weren't allowed to create them before because it wasn't in the mindset or the model or the fire code wouldn't let us. But now because of the pandemic, fire codes are shifting so we can allow for more spaces. And that's where our flexible furniture comes into play. We can spread kids out. We can reduce the aerosol impact of the virus by utilizing small groups of students. And I think that that shifts the role of school in a huge way and really impacts the design work that we do and even the furniture choices and the configurations that we bring together.
Yeah, our design team at Muzo has been looking to see how our furniture is relevant for these schools who need to replan and repurpose their spaces. We've taken into consideration our kite and mini mobile tables as their mobility, holding and nesting mechanisms are great for transport and storage. These tables can also reconfigure together once we no longer need to social distance. Once the CDC gives us the okay to collaborate with our peers in a social setting again, these tables can reconfigure together. They also have a really great relationship with our K seat, which also has really great transport and storage abilities. These chairs are really durable, injection molded, easy to wipe down, and they stack 30 high and also have a dolly to transport wherever you need throughout your school. But something else us educators and designers need to take into consideration is furniture that can be utilized indoors and out. It's really important that we take advantage of that safe air quality.
We're really looking at some of the CDC guidelines are focused on, or quite a bit on ventilation. And so how are we creating safe ventilation? So that means how do we use our outdoor spaces? We have some schools that are setting up huge big tents and shade areas so that we can create learning spaces outside. So then what are the kinds of resources that we're going to need to be able to use? I think you bring up a really great point. What kind of furniture can we take in and out that's flexible, that's light, that kids can move, that they can sit on, that can also be turned into, you know, barriers for small groups to maintain social distancing. But those of us who are experiential, outside, project-based learning folks, this is kind of our dream. That we're saying school has to change because of the pandemic. It's this shared collective experience of everyone saying, okay, it has to change. And how do we balance that with CDC guidelines so we don't get pushed back into these rows and arrays of kids who are totally separate and not collaborating because we've come so far?
Yeah, incorporating outdoor learning not only benefits our safety, but it brings that aspect to school for children that school is fun and it's a safe place to be. That again can help foster that natural curiosity and self-directed behavior.
Absolutely. And making sure that schools are, and I think this is part of that experiential place that we hope to honor for kids, because kids have a value set. They have a life outside of the school building, and we typically forget that life when they come through the school doors. And because we're in this pandemic, this huge shift, we're saying your life outdoors, outside the school doors, is still part of your healthy environment. And so we have to take that into consideration, which means that social justice and equity, it means that social and emotional learning is still is not an add-on. It has to be a foundation to really make this a high quality learning experience for kids, as we as the adults figure out how to mitigate and interpret all these modifications that need to come into play. Because community-based learning and using the community as your classroom right now in an experiential environment is really not going to work because of social distancing and the CDC guidelines, no field trips. You can have the community come in virtually. And so that's a bonus, absolutely. But we can't pretend that the risk of infection isn't there. So we have to weigh the risk factors with the spread and what's a low risk activity versus a high risk activity, which based on research is going to change some of that experiential piece. And so we have to really be thoughtful so we don't stumble back 60 years in learning and what we've done so far. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we want to stray away from recreating those traditional classrooms that designers and educators have worked so hard on redeveloping. I think that brings us full circle to why it's so important to give our students a voice in deciding how they want to learn. And that also highlights the importance of our flexible learning cultures and bringing in that flexible furniture into our schools. I think our viewers have gotten some great insight on what you and your team at Fielding International are doing to help prepare our schools and communities around the world.
Good. I think it's wonderful to be able to have organizations like us partner together and really collaborate on the design of learning spaces and be intentional, to include student voice, because they are part of the process. So instead of designing for them, really designing with them becomes our own experiential project-based learning experience, and really thinking about how we bring them into the fold and give them a seat at the table without making their voice a token in the process, but really including them as a valued member of the decision-making process. And I appreciate that organizations like yours value that as well.
Absolutely. Our goal at Muzo is to provide inclusive products and spaces for our users to positively impact their day-to-day lives. It's really important to connect with organizations like you and Fielding International so we can achieve these goals. Well, we thank you for joining us today, Jill, and we look forward to working with you and your organization on future projects. Can't wait to see what the future holds for education.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And we're excited to move forward. We've got great projects in the works. Our Eden Park project has been a phenomenal experience, between our furniture, recreating their design as a learning community. We've shifted their population and changed the mindset of their teachers. I hear from their teachers almost on a weekly basis at Eden Park,
Awesome.
how they're taking their project-based learning and pedagogical shifts into the online realm, but that at the same time looking at their data and the reduction in referrals to the office. Special ed, their special ed scores have gone up. Their math and reading scores have gone up, and just really the impact on families and community. And that's a collaborative project between Muzo and Fielding International. So we're really proud of that project.
Awesome to hear. Yeah, we are really proud of the Eden Park project, and it's really rewarding to hear all the positive impact they have been having in that learning community. Well, thank you again for your time today, Jill. I hope to connect with you soon.
Good.